All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Retic Rant. It has been a while since we've done a live broadcast here, and people have been asking me to bring it back, and I've been kind of reluctant and just not a whole lot of motivation, but I'm going to thank the Retic Lounge first and foremost. I talked to Lucas. I talked to Nathan, and they said, man, you really got to bring this back. They really gave me some positive input. And at that point, it was just like a no-brainer. We need to do this. We need to bring it back. And tonight, we've got an amazing, amazing episode, right? Like a lot of people talking about locality retics versus mainland retics. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about mainland retics. We're going to talk about locality retics. And we've got an amazing group of people to do that. But before I introduce those people, first of all, I just want to, big shout out to US ARC, you guys. Oops, this side, US ARC. They are the people that are helping us protect our rights and keep our animals in our homes. So if you get the opportunity, please go to usarc.org and please become a member, donate, do whatever you can. But we're all in this together. And US ARC is a much stronger entity when we are all bonded together. So please support US ARC. And of course, I'm going to give a shout out to Ship Your Reptiles. They have always been the #1 shipping company for me, whether it's me shipping a reptile out or receiving a reptile. Ship Your Reptiles has always been the #1 company for me. So now, with that being said, I'm going to bring in our guest tonight and the wonderful people that we are bringing in. We don't have... where's Nicole? Nicole's running a little late. So we have Lucas Bagnara from LadyTis Exotics and the Retic Lounge. We have Tim from Intrepid Exotics. Tim, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. If you notice, I said J on every, I just used your first initial because I would tear it up, man. So I didn't want to do that to you.
15, you're good.
Yeah, and my good friend Chris, man. Chris has been one of those people that I've just had a lot of respect for, that I have been able to become not just a person that's purchased animals from him, but a good friend too. He's always been there for me. Chris, welcome back. You guys have all been on this before, man. So, what we're going to do is, first of all, I want to thank you guys for joining. And the topic tonight is locality retics versus mainland retics. And I want to just kind of specify, when we talk about localities, that can be a broad spectrum of reticulated pythons. It really can. But I'm going to limit the localities to the coyotes, the jampeas, the madus, the calatoas, the salayers, the tambalongans. I believe I pronounced that correctly. The sulawasis, the balis. So not necessarily a shorter or a smaller locality, but locality based, where the keeper or the breeder, for instance, wants to keep that animal at a pure level. So, and I've got Lucas Bagnara on here. You do primarily super dwarf, correct? Or smaller locality. That's going to be one of the things we talk about. So,
yeah. So I have a pretty wide range. I work with Sulas. I work with Salayers, Ternate, Halmaheras, and those and Jampe as well. And those generally are in the medium to larger range. Oh, and Philippines as well. And then I have Coyote and Kalatoa. But actually, if we're talking about like super dwarf, I actually have less super dwarf localities than I do of dwarf or I guess I have one more than mainlands, but yeah. So just kind of a spectrum.
Awesome. Tim from Intrepid Exotics, man. Tim, you've got an amazing channel, and you've been one of the best educators, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to information being put out on your channel. You talk about everything from care to your ability to reach out to people and FaceTime, in their presence if they're having trouble with an animal. And to me, you're like one of the most respected keepers out there. And you work primarily with mainland. Is that correct?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, from my perspective, I don't really differentiate. I've got mainland males that are 6-7 feet long, So, in all reality, it's the same size of snake as you'd see in a dwarf or a super dwarf or anything like that. But I don't know. I take a little bit different train of thought and a different approach than a lot of people do, because almost all of my animals, save for two, kind of came to me by chance. I don't seek them out because of morphs or genetics or even species a lot of times. I take them in as I see they need to be taken in and as I have room for them. And of course, I've got, the two Mainlands. The only two that I actually bought that I was going after a specific animal is my 16-foot male purple tiger and my little Burmese normal female back here. But yeah, I don't, since I don't breed and things like that, I focus specifically on, the handling, the relationship, the behaviors and stuff like that, kind of irrespective of what morphs and localities and things like that. So.
Awesome. Chris, man, you've worked with Mainlands, you've worked with super dwarfs, you've worked with dwarfs, you've pretty much worked with probably every spectrum of reticulated pythons available to the United States. Am I correct?
I've had quite a bit over the years. Not a whole lot of pures, but worked with quite a bit of different localities, different sizes. So had a bit of everything.
Awesome. So what we're going to do here is, you guys have been on the show before, so I'm just going to ask questions. We're going to round robin the answers. I'm going to start with Lucas. Lucas, how long have you been keeping Retics, and what are you currently keeping now?
So I've been keeping Retics for only 6 years. So not a long time. Now in the time that I've been keeping Retics, at one point with babies that I produced, I've had over 150 at one point, but, what I'm really focusing in right now on is like I said, locality stuff. I've worked with Jampayas, I've worked with Kalatoa, Kayuati, Ternate, Halmahera, Sulawesi, Mindanao, Philippines, Bohol and Davao Philippine crosses. And then within that, I also have a few morphs. So I have an ocelot male. I also have a pet. It's really my daughter's snake. It's a 68.75% Kalatoa that Nathan, my co-host, produced. And that's my daughter's snake. So I do have a tiger in there as well. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head if I have any other morphs right now in my collection. I do have a super jamp, so a Kalatoa Jampea cross that's anery. So I do have anathoristic in my animals, but that's a locality cross. So as far as Retics, that's where I'm at. But I've been dabbling in for the last year into other species. So I have chondros and different Morelias. I have Sri Lankan pythons. I also have Amazon tree boas. Just got a pair of bull snakes that are phenomenal. So yeah, I'm kind of just like, I'm in my experimental phase in the last year, just kind of broadening my horizons with different species. It's been a blast. I've been a diehard retic person for the last 6 years. Kept a bunch of other species growing up, but it's nice to get out of that comfort zone and learn more with the other species. I truly do think you become a better keeper when you work with different demeanors. But yeah, as far as the Retics go, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 morphs, but everything else is locality. And even out of my locality stuff, I would say 90% of my locality stuff is wild caught or F1.
Awesome. How about you, Tim? What do you, I mean, we know what you have, but go ahead and share with us how long you've been keeping them and what you got right now. I got to get Nicole in here. She's messaging me right now, but go ahead, Tim.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know. I probably switched over from the marine aquariums maybe 6 or 7 years ago again as well, because that's kind of what I got started on. I've got a lot of experience handling a lot of really huge, unruly snakes. And that's kind of where we all transitioned into the YouTube thing and kind of teaching out the behavior and handling stuff. And then I'll just kind of snowballed from there. But I keep the Retics. I've got a couple hognose, a couple ball pythons. The Jag Pondro, who actually just bit me in the middle of the Zoom call earlier.
Nice.
Happens to the best of us. So I'm kind of waiting for the hematoma to go down a little bit. But the hematoma, or not the hematoma, the Jagpondro, Sri Lankan, got some smaller retics. What else do I got? Jungle carpet python, the green tree python. I probably said hognose. And then, of course, there's Niles, the Nile monitor, who's kind of, he's going to be a little bit more world famous because he just took a really big bite out of me not too long ago. So,
jeez,
getting ready. The 6 foot Nile monitor, and I caught it on video just by chance.
Looking forward to seeing that one.
Yeah. I was just hanging out and I turned the cell phone around to say, "Hey, look at how cool my," and you can hear it on the video, crunch. I was like, "Oh no."
That's good.
So that's going to be my next video, I think, is how to manage a Nile monitor bite. But then I keep him and then the Argentine black and white tegu. Got leopard geckos and rats, prairie dogs, hedgehogs, stuff like that.
Awesome. Chris, what about you? How long have you been keeping, and what are you currently keeping right now?
So I've been keeping let's see. I got my first retics, I think, in like 06, 07 time frame. Got a lot less these days. I probably only got about 16 or so retics. But keep retics, boas.
That's it?
Yeah, it's not a ton, man.
Oh.
Well, I mean,
what happened?
I got smart. I don't want to produce 800 babies like that. That was insane back then. So yeah, downsizing was a good thing, but yeah, the retics, the boas, Angolans, jungle jag, ATB, pure diamond, Cayman, and then my wife's got some odd and end stuff. But yeah, mostly just the retics and boas these days.
Very cool. Welcome, Nicole.
What's up,
How
Nicole?
are
I
you?
apologize. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
First of all, I want to put my face next to Lucas' face.
I know we this is the first time I've seen you like face to face. What's going on?
Right? How are you?
I'm doing well.
yeah.
Lucas always looks so polished on screen. Put my face next to you. I apologize, y'all. So for some reason, StreamYard kept taking me into my own StreamYard, so I had to figure and maneuver it. And I'm at the Southeast Reptile Show. So you know when you're not at your home and your regular setup, you go into a full panic mode. So Mary, I messaged you. I'm like, oh my God, is he going to see the message? Is he going to see the message? So
I seen those pictures you out there with keys.
Oh, it is amazing. Shout out to Ballvoo. He did his thing. It's amazing out here.
Oh, I'm glad you could make it. Thanks for taking the time to come in, Nicole. And I have a lot of respect for you and your channel and you know what you do with the retics. And the question for you is how long have you been keeping and what are you currently keeping right now?
So I've kept animals. So starting with ball pythons, 30. So it's now 36 years since I had my very first ball python. Ball pythons was my thing because everybody else made me scared of the snakes that I really wanted, which was the retics and the berms, the big snakes, right? So I went from ball pythons into boas, and I think it was 2017 when I said I'm gonna get my very first retic, and that's T'Challa, the Mali golden child sunfire. Got her in my possession 2018. She was my very first, and I fell in love. It was it. Like I think it went T'Challa, the next month Hefe. The next month I got the cow, and then it just went like every month after that until, you know, of course you get to that point where this is enough for me, right? You know, and I never had intent to breed them at first too. So that was another thing. So they were going to be totally pets. So I never had an intent to have a lot of them. Honestly, though, if it wasn't for the sake of, you know, my house is not a mansion, and the sake that there's not a lot of people who really can keep, whether it's a dwarf, super dwarf, or mainland, effectively, it would be all retics for me. All, nothing but.
It's funny because, you know, I think about it. When people ask me about, you know, snakes in my rooms, I have 5 rooms, and it's interesting because I include living rooms when I say this, and I also include my wife's reading room and my grandkids, room when they come over.
Mhm.
But that's 5 rooms with 8-foot enclosures in them with Retics.
Yeah.
So I'm a very fortunate person to be able to house and keep the amount of Retics that I do in what I feel is proper caging.
Right.
So my next question for you guys is so most of you I have Nicole and Tim, because you guys are primarily keeping mainlands. Is that correct?
Yes. I only have one dwarf, a little spoil riding self. I don't have any super dwarfs. But I do have one dwarf, which is a really cool snake. I'm not going to tell any stories. She's a cool baby. And she just can't roam around and not get lost like the mainlands can. And if it wasn't for that, you always hear me say a retic is a retic. They all the same in personality, like except for size. But if it wasn't for that, the dwarf would probably be the coolest, right? But because she has a big personality for a smaller snake, honestly. But you cannot let her just roam around. She'll be into everything. It is like a little terrible two of versus my mainlands who, they where they are. They knocking stuff over. The tree that you fell or the plant or whatever is over there.
So true. So true. They're knocking stuff off the top of the fridge off.
Yes.
What about you, Tim? Do you keep anything? Do you have a dwarf now?
No.
No, so you're keeping straight mainlands.
Yeah. I don't have any other dwarf, super dwarf, retics, anything like that.
They're the puppy dogs of retics.
Any plan for locality or mixed locality in the future?
I don't know. I think in a lot of respects, when you're talking about dwarf and super dwarf retics, people have got their personal preferences and so forth, but I think a lot of people recommend them because they don't want to manage a large snake.
Right.
And I don't mind. The bigger my snake is, the better. I focus on building that relationship with them. And although if I've got to be dragging an 80, 90 pound animal around the yard or something like that, you feel it. But, which is why I've only got 2 big adult mainlands. I don't have the space for it, nor do I have the time or energy to manage a lot of big snakes anymore. But little snakes are cool. I think if you're not comfortable with a big snake, then cool, get a little snake. I personally love having a snake that I work with that is friggin' as big as, as heavy as a bag of concrete and, just as reactive.
You don't have to go to the gym when you have a mainland.
Yeah, between working with the snakes and then all this wildlife photography and carrying camera packs through the woods for miles, then it's working out, man. I'm literally.
I'll share with you my 13-footer. She weighs probably 37 pounds or so, right? And I had her out yesterday, right before she shed, and she was super active. Like I was literally trying to keep up with her for 5 minutes, and I felt like I was on a treadmill for 30 minutes. That's how. She's never been so active, but 35-pound, 13-foot animal just trying to go, and you're trying to keep up, man. It is a workout. I totally get it.
My big male is just like that. He's 16 feet and close to 80, between 70 and 80 pounds, but he's my most active snake when I get him outside, and he's like a big corn snake. He's just over the place, man, and I am pouring sweat after working with him.
So Chris and Lucas, this question is more for you two because you guys have both worked with locality. But I'll go with you first, Lucas. Have you owned any pure localities, mixed localities, or just mainland? So basically, however you want to answer that question. What have you worked with as far as localities are concerned?
So yes to all 3. So I've kept mainlands and mainlands that were larger, 14 feet, probably upwards of 85, 90 pounds. The locality stuff that I work with, like I mentioned, I have 8 different localities ranging from, what the industry calls super dwarfs, and then all the way up to Sulawesi's, which would be considered like a mainland locality, right? And so, and then I also do have locality crosses. I actually have a locality cross clutch that's incubating right now with Solaire Kalatoa. So yeah, and I mean, I will say this, a lot of people, and I'm glad that you even said that earlier, a lot of people tend to think of me as a super dwarf guy, right? When I first got into Retics, I was very much on the super dwarf hype and bandwagon. My very first couple Retics were super dwarf related, but I've always just more so had a passion for locality stuff. And so, it's really cool because you got like the mainland people that fight with the super dwarf people and all this size crap that happens. And I'm over here and I'm just like, I have a Kalatoa. If you want to call it a super dwarf, you can call it a super dwarf. And so I really do appreciate working with the different localities and locality crosses because you get a wide spectrum of different behaviors, especially because most of my animals are F1s. And what I will say to kind of just like further, just to kind of build off of what Tim and Nikki were saying, mainlands are phenomenal animals, right? And I really think that like they are an animal that if you have the space to keep them, and you're not concerned about having a larger retic, the mainlands that I've had here, I had Tina, she was a tiger, I sold her, right, real original. But she was a snake that I could open up her enclosure and sit in front of it and she'd come right up to me, slow moving, chill. When you get her outside, she'd get a little bit quicker. But working with a lot of different localities, these localities move through your hands a lot, especially the smaller localities and the insular dwarf island localities. They move a bunch. They're constantly wanting to go up. Mainland's just got that nice, easy, just chill flow with them for the most part. Yeah, but that's basically, I mean, to answer your questions, yeah, I don't know if there's any more. And yeah, Travis, that's the one that you got for me, Tina.
Thank you. Chris, you've worked with pretty much everything, so go ahead and expand on this question.
So I haven't worked with nearly as many pure localities as Lucas has, but I've had Bali's, Kalatoa, Kayawati, Slayer, obviously, and lots of mainlands over the years. I kind of agree with Lucas. Like the mainlands, if I could physically still do it, I still would. They're sweet animals. They've been around longer in captivity, so I think a lot of that aggression and stuff is kind of bred out of them. And it could just be the size, but the super dwarfs and dwarfs, they're definitely a lot more active. So it's fun. It's a give and take. You go from the smaller size to the bigger size. You just got to be able to keep them correctly and enjoy them. So both are great animals.
Yeah, and I think that's the greatest, I feel like, misinterpretation between the two is just that people think because it's a super dwarf or a dwarf, it's going to be less accurate. It's totally opposite.
Oh, yeah. And they're like the track stars.
Yeah, and
right.
Like what Lucas said, all of my mainlands come straight out. You will never see me pulling a mainland out of the enclosure. You would never see me putting one back. It goes back when it wants to. I've been sharing now my golden child cow. We experiment with the fact that for whatever reason she thinks she lives in the house and not in the enclosure. She's only in the enclosure for 8 hours a day. But I am home. So, I'm able to be there and supervise and take those notes and document and all of that. So again, I'm fortunate in that way to work with them where honestly, I'm discovering that, they're not like dogs. I don't want to say that, but there is a relationship that I have with two of my largest one. My 16-footer is very dog-like with me. And what I mean by that, if I go from one room to the next, you will see that snake follow my feet one room to the next. But then I have a motley tiger that you can leave her enclosure door open 24/7, and all she's going to do is come to the tip of it and watch all the other snakes go by. So the personality differences are huge. But when it's with mainlands, I have to agree with Lucas. What I love about him the most compared to my dwarf, like I said that in the beginning, my dwarf, you want to be with a snake, play with a snake. When you get the dwarf out, you want the snake on you, walking around and fully attentive. Where with my mainlands, I can wash dishes, clothes, go upstairs, downstairs, and all that type of stuff. And they're fine. I mean, yes, you might hear it or see the 16-footer move a table or something in the midst of it, but it's having a good time doing it, So I don't really, I like to see them do that.
The best part is when that snake gets behind a bunch of cages and gets wrapped around the cord and starts pulling off thermostats and unplugging things.
Right.
You got a retic in the room when you hear beep, beep,
Yeah.
beep, right?
Yeah.
Like,
It's the worst.
They get wrapped up in the rungs of the chair and then pull the chair down on the ground. You got things crashing everywhere. So one of the things, Nicole, that you said a long time ago that when I think I first met you or when I first started following you, and it has stuck with me, is I get to come home to my own little jungle every day.
Every day.
What I mean? I mean, that put a lot of perspective, and plus it put the amount of love. And I think that as Retic owners, and maybe I can't speak for any other, I think it takes someone special to own Retics.
Definitely.
But when you said that, I mean, it really put a lot of things into perspective, because these are where they stay, but I have them out every day. So their enrichment is not inside this enclosure.
Yep.
It's outside. It's in the house. It's around me. So I wanted to thank you for that. And before we go into our next round of questions, first of all, I want to thank Jeremy Wilcox from World of Wilcox. He is managing everything behind the scenes right now for us.
Great job, man.
The comments, he's running the banners, and it's just making this for me so much easier. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And if you guys have questions for the guys, please put that question out there. Jeremy will get it on the screen and we'll have everybody answer it here.
hit the like button too. Saying, if you're in the live chat, just hit the like button. It's
right.
Literally like 2 steps away. It's one finger touch. Hit the like button.
And it's really what this does is it puts this video in the hands of other people. For my channel, I really could care less, but the information that's in this video needs to be out there for people. So that would be the reason I say, please hit that like button and get the algorithms up on this video so that it's accessible and it gets into the hands of people that need to see it. I don't know who's going to be able to answer this. I know Chris would be able to, but how many of you guys have been involved in the exportation of bringing Retics into the United States?
I actually haven't.
Oh, you haven't? I thought you had been. The reason I brought that question up, and this could be a good segue, is this book right here, man. You guys, Lucas, Chris, you guys have been instrumental with this book. I see your pictures all over it, and I want to thank you guys for your contribution. How did you guys get involved with the book? Glenn reached out to you?
Actually, my buddy Russ helped with the book. He lives here in Oklahoma, and I've known him for a long time. He reached out to me and got me in contact with Glenn, and got to talking and helped where I could. Lucas took care of a lot of it, and they did an amazing job on that book. I can't wait to dive into it some more.
I am not a reader, but I have not been able to put it down, and it's not because of the pictures.
I'm gonna do a shameful plug here, or shameless plug, I should say. But starting next week, the Retic Lounge is going to be breaking apart chapter by chapter and doing a book club for those people that don't like to read but want the audio version. So Nathan and I are going to break it down. But yeah, I've been really good friends with Glenn for probably the better half of 2.5 years, and Glenn originally, we would talk every single day, and it was about snake stuff, not snake stuff. He told me that his professor let him switch over his thesis to talk about the insular island reticulated pythons and like what we call dwarf and super dwarf. And he started putting together a lot of research and information and was bouncing thoughts off. Within a week, it went from what was going to be the complete dwarf and super dwarf reticulated python, and it ended up expanding because he reached out to so many different people. So throughout the process, we were messaging about it, having phone calls about it. He would send me drafts of it. He asked me for pictures early on, and then later on, I take zero credit. Like we were just having Retic talk and he was just getting information down. I'm fortunate enough that he put a lot of my pictures and some of the information that we talked about in the book. Glenn and Russ did a phenomenal job. It was about 2.5 years of information research gathering. And like I said on the episode that I had with Glenn, what's inspiring about all of this is Glenn has had one Retic. And he was able to compromise and put together a phenomenal book just from talking and networking and bringing the community together. For those of you that are in the Retic community, you know that's a hard thing to do, is get the Retic community to come together. And so hats off to Glenn. He put together probably the most comprehensive reticulated Python information, whether it's a book or online, and he did that all by just reaching out to people. He did a great job.
One of the things that I really enjoy about it is the sequencing of how he put the book together. I mean, it just flows from start to where I'm at right now in morphology. Everything is just kind of gone from one to the other to the other to the other in such a followable sequence that it just keeps you reading it. And like I said, I hate reading. I'm probably one of the worst readers or comprehenders, but you put something out that says reticulated Python on it, and it's got my interest. And then when I start looking at the pictures and I see, Lucas's animals in here, I see Chris's information in here. I mean, these are people that I know, man, and it's just like I just get that wow factor, Tim, Nikki, have you guys gotten a copy of the book yet? Do you have any thoughts about it?
I have not. I didn't even know the book existed until I think maybe you posted yours or somebody posted one about 2 weeks ago. I will say that when I first got into Retics, one of the things I complained about, but it was interesting that there was not as much information on Retics as it was on ball pythons. And the book that I ended up getting was by Sid James, which I thought was a really good book too. And he may have helped, if I'm not mistaken, with Glenn's book as well. And with same thing, I love the sequencing of that book, but definitely we could have had a more complete version, like we have the complete ball python version. So where am I finding the book? Because I don't even see
Amazon.
Oh, it's on Amazon. Okay, I'm going to order mine right after, because I saw it.
If you want a signed copy, just reach out to him.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely want that book. I thought it was just for a select people, like maybe they made a few copies and sent it out. I didn't know it was actually for sale. So I'll get mine right away.
Oh yeah, they still got a lot left.
It's only for the cool kids club, Nikki.
Yeah. That's natural. That's automatic. I keep Retic, right?
You are part of the cool kids club.
We already cool kids.
Nicole started the cool kids club. What are you talking about?
Right.
He's ground floor.
One thing I do want to say about the book that's amazing, it's I think the longest or the second longest of the complete series, and it is by far the most affordable book that's also been put out of the complete series. It's a great price for the information that's in there.
I was actually kind of surprised on the price.
Yeah, don't
tell him yet. Let me order mine first, Chris.
Get your hands on one.
Yep.
Right after this podcast, I'll order mine. And then Chris, you call him and tell him to increase it. No, I'm joking.
I was waiting for Lucas to make the movie.
I will say that I got the book. I never talked to or met Glenn. I reached out to him. I thanked him for all the information that I just came across within the first few pages. And we must have went back and forth for a couple of days with messages. A very, very easy guy to talk to. My experience with him was just super communicable and nice. So if you reach out to him, if you want a signed copy, I got the Amazon copy. Plus I also ordered a copy that was signed from him that I could have next to my complete boa constrictor book. Tim, did you have any thoughts about that you wanted to add, or
about the book?
Yeah.
No, I haven't read it yet, so I really don't have any thoughts on it. But I know that's something that a lot of people have been asking for. They've been asking several people And people have been all over Kevin McCurley saying, dude, write a book, write a retic book. So yeah,
Kevin should just come out with one about the history, like just importation, like what all he did, not even just for the retics, but just a book on his life. I'd read it.
An autobiography, absolutely.
It's a time factor, and then everybody, books are personality driven. You gotta want to sit down, take the time, and put that, to collect all of the information for anyone to gather it, and get it all together from different people, especially the history, the breakdown of the different localities and everything. My question is, please tell me, is a big section in there for breeding?
Yeah.
Or
yes.
Okay, because that's what the other books don't have. They don't have the technicality of breeding retics, things that you may observe or see, or that type of stuff. I pretty much, for me, had to experience it all for my own. Don't get me wrong, there are people, Aubrey, that I can reach out to, Jake, that I can ask very specific questions about the process, but there's not a lot. And I'll tell you this right here, is when it comes to mainlands, even when it comes to genetics, there are some parents that I did, or that I was confused about, that I sent to 3 different people and got 3 different answers on genetics.
That sounds about right. It sounds about right. It sounds about right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Now we're going to get into some fun questions here.
Okay.
And because we did this as mainland versus locality retics, I want to attack the super dwarf naming here, because in my opinion, and Lucas,
can I attack it too?
Oh yeah. This is something that, to me, it was like, I understand now, but I thought it was really a thing. A super dwarf was a reticulated python, and through talking with Chris, listening to Lucas, I now know that this is a marketing term. But I also know that there's people out there that are confused when people say that this snake here is only going to get 8 feet long. And there's no one on this planet that can guarantee the size of even a pure locality animal. So I want to talk about this, so that if there's anybody listening to this, maybe they get a different perception on what super dwarf and dwarf truly means. So starting with Tim, we're going to start with you. What is your take on super dwarf and the misleading information that we can get with that?
I honestly don't think it's very misleading at all. If you're talking about localities, the thing is that breeders, one, they got to be honest, they got to be transparent, and they've got to explain to people what these terms mean. It's not complicated.
Right.
The problem is that, just like you say, people hear super dwarf and it's like, okay, yeah, this is going to get no bigger than a corn snake, we're good to go. Well, maybe not. Right. And breeders really need to be transparent and explain that to people and say, hey, it's this percentage or more of this locality. And, we're going to call it a super dwarf because it's anticipated to not get very big. This percentage is going to be called a dwarf. And, you've always, the thing that I was always afraid of when people started using the term super dwarf was that people who already know that they can't handle a 16, 18-foot snake are going to fall into the trap of some disreputable people who are saying, I can get $3,000 more for this snake if I call it a super dwarf. And they sell it as super dwarf. It's bred half and half with a mainland. And, this person ends up with a snake that's bigger than they can handle and stuff. So I don't know that it's misleading or negative necessarily, because it's not a really complex thing to absorb and understand. It's just got to be explained properly. Mm-hmm. And folks need to understand it. We can call it whatever we want to, but it doesn't necessarily mean, it is still going to be a big snake of some sort, in many cases. So
I agree with that 100%, Amy. Absolutely agree with that 100%. Nikki, how about you? What's your take on super dwarf?
So I'm gonna start on. I'm gonna come to that, but I'm gonna start since Tim kind of addressed kind of the same things that I'm gonna say. The other part of that is everything that's a mainland is not going to get 16 feet. I have a mainland that's actually probably smaller than my dwarf that we talked about. So my thing is, what I tell people when they reach out to me and they'll ask me, "Hey, I just bought this snake," and they told me it was a super dwarf. And I'll ask first, who told you? Because first thing right there is who's the breeder, right? That's and not saying that just because a breeder has I would say this in the super dwarf and dwarf community, I feel like the breeders who's doing it right are very honest. That's so when someone says the breeder and I say, okay, then what did the breeder tell you is another thing that I go into. Because one of the things I want people to understand, unless you raise those animals up, bred them yourself, and even that whole look at the mother and father thing doesn't work because I got animals who are getting bigger than their parents already, so that doesn't work. I think that people should really understand this. It doesn't matter. Do you want a retic or not? That's my thing. Or do you want a boa? Because I'm going to be honest, to me and my collection, because y'all know I keep it all. My boas, I respect way more than my retics when it comes to feeding and stuff like that. My retics have a brain that works, that they know how to use, where the boas don't, do not. So I say to people too, but if you don't want a retic, I can't tell you that a boa is a better animal for you. You might just want a ball python or a corn snake or a California king or something like that. So for me, do you want a retic or not? How big it's going to get, you're going to have to love it no matter how big it's going to get. So I'm more concerned about, are you capable to house it for that time? And are you going to be able to feed it for that time financially yourself without asking for donations? Because that drives me crazy. I'm not helping you feed your
Cash App link in the comments.
Go fund me.
Oh, man. I'm
Thank
loving
you.
these responses so far.
Yeah, and so I saved Lucas and Chris for last on this because of the fact that they do work with these animals, and a lot of the information that I got was from Lucas and Chris, and they've been very honest and transparent with me. My first mixed locality was from Chris, and I mean, there was no guarantee that she was going to stay small, she was going to get big. This is what to expect, and I wanted, when I first got into, or back into retics, what I wanted was a smaller retic. I did the research, but the research I didn't tell me that super dwarf was a marketing term. They didn't tell me that super dwarf was a locality. They just basically said 50% of a locality mixed with a mainland, depending on the island, constitutes a super dwarf. And I ran with that. So after getting more information, more correct information, I like what Nikki just said about if you're going to buy a retic, you're just going to have to expect, no matter what, that at the end of the day, you can have a 8-foot animal, depending on what you're being told, to a 16-foot animal. You're going to have to love it. You're going to have to take care of it, house it the way that animal grows. So Lucas, I'm going to go right to you on this. I know you got a lot to say about this. So
I want to not be, man, I don't want to be long-winded here, but I have my brain is going in so many different directions, and I'm going to try to, just try to be short. I don't want to monopolize this, but first and foremost, I think that there's something that is important that we all just put out there. And that is that when we talk about super dwarf and dwarf, what we are like at the fundamental part of it, we're talking about islands of reticulated pythons that have been separated from the mainland through evolution because of a scarcity of food, insular dwarfism. For those that don't know what it is that they break away from the mainland. There's less food availability on the island, or maybe not less food, but smaller food, and therefore they don't grow as large. And in the case on Kalatoa, something that Daniel Solis went over and observed, again, nothing factual here, but what he observed and something that Daniel Solis said that I thought really made sense as far as an evolutionary process is that, it's possible that Kalatoa retics on the island of Kalatoa are evolved to be smaller because of they have a competing predator, which are monitors on that island. And because the island is full of cave systems, being smaller is probably more advantageous to hide within the cave structures where they're away from the monitors, right? So there's a lot of reasons why these animals stay smaller, but that's what we're talking about at its basic fundamental, right? Where I think that the misconceptions or the misinformation comes is the moment that we start talking about locality crosses, right? So right now, the industry standard states that a super dwarf is 50%, right? So that is a 50% super dwarf island. Kalatoa, Madu, Karumpa or Karampa, and Kayuwati, or, arguably in the UK and in the US, Tambalongan, maybe. I don't think so. And then the other 50% is mainland, right? So that to me, right off the bat, we're talking about half super dwarf, half mainland. And the same thing with dwarf. 50% dwarf, which is Solaire, Ternate, Jampea, and then the other 50% is mainland. So whenever you are talking about 50% to 50%, it's really you're taking dice and you're rolling them in your hand, you're throwing them against the wall, and you're taking a bet on which snake from the clutch is going to hit a larger percentage on the super dwarf side or on the mainland side, right? And so that's the cool thing about being a locality person and not a mainland and not a super dwarf or dwarf person, is that through my observations, the moment that you mix mainland blood in, regardless of the percentage, you have a percentage and a chance that your snake is going to get bigger than you anticipated or intended. So yeah, I've had 3 wild caught male Kalatoas, all of which were over 12 years old, right? So definitely at a adult at that point, right? My biggest pet peeve is when people say I have an adult retic and it's 4 or 5 years old. Not the case. And so every single one of those male Kalatoas has been at least 7.5 feet and at the most a little bit over 8 feet, right? So if you really want a small reticulated python, between 7 to 9 feet, you have to go with a pure. That is your guaranteed way to do it, in my opinion. I know that there's a lot of debate about people that are breeding for smaller animals, and they're line breeding, and they're taking the smallest animals from the clutch and they're breeding them together. I personally don't think that we have enough data that supports that theory, because people are not holding clutches back and looking at their longevity of when these animals are adult size at 10 years old, and they're not holding back entire clutches, and then they're selling all of them off and keeping the smallest ones back. The smallest snake in a clutch does not determine the smallest adult size.
Thank you.
In my opinion, right? And this is all anecdotal. This is all opinions, right? Because no one has studied this scientifically. So, I came out the biggest baby out of my 2 brothers, and I have one brother that is bigger than me. He's taller than me, right? So when it comes to talking about the super dwarf and dwarf stuff and size potential, the only way to guarantee that you're going to get a manageable size retic, right, 7 to 10 feet, is if you go with a pure super dwarf locality, in my opinion. Now that is through my observation. Now I will publicly state any differing opinion on that as it comes along. But I even see 75% super dwarfs that are still getting 12 feet. I have a 10-foot wild caught Kalatoa female in my garage right now. That is a super dwarf, a pure super dwarf, and she's 10 foot. So again, if you're going into this, you are getting a reticulated python. I'm going to end on this. I want to go back to Tim and what he said.
Yeah, I want to get something here in a second too.
Yeah, I want to go back to what Tim said. Tim said, like, if you're getting into a retic and you're expecting like a corn snake size, it's not right? And I think that Tim is correct in the sense that super dwarf and dwarf aren't misleading if you're putting good information out there. At the end of the day, what people need to really remember is that a super dwarf reticulated python is a super dwarf version of the longest snake species in the world.
Amen. Yeah.
So I just want people to keep that in mind, because the last thing that I want for new keepers is getting an animal and in 5 years having an animal that exceeded the size expectation, and then it just goes down that rabbit hole of rehoming, shelters. I mean, Tim is a great advocate of rescuing animals, and some of the most popular animals that are being rehomed at these rescues are large constrictors, because people just they bite into something that they can't they just can't.
Yeah, they just can't
keep. Yeah.
And I think I'm going to kind of piggyback on what you was talking about, the about the evolutionary process of mainlands ending up on the islands and getting smaller because of environmental pressures and so forth. That, it's hard to predict the future. Animal genetics is crazy. Just nature in itself is crazy. If these are mainland snakes that evolved to suit the environments of the islands that they're on, we bring these out, we breed those pure genetics against each other a lot more frequently without those same environmental pressures. There's nothing to say that those snakes are still not going to revert back to what they initially were in the beginning.
Thank you. Yes.
Evolution, it's not a ladder. Things aren't getting better and better as time goes on. They might change this way. As their environment changes, they can change another way to adapt to that as well. It's a lot more lateral. So that, there's a really good possibility that we can go ahead and try and get 100% locality and keep breeding them. But if these things change from eating the bats on the island to eating the rabbits that I've got in my freezer,
Right.
and there's no environmental pressures and their enclosure sizes are going to adapt to fit however big they get, there's a really good possibility to, super dwarf may actually just be a thing of the past at some point,
Tim, if you ask anybody in the comments that's on my Patreon, I have said that on the Discord probably 100 times.
Oh, really?
That yeah, and I love that you said that, because we are slowly reversing insular dwarfism by introducing these snakes who are eating primarily bats on these islands to pigs and rabbits. And what's crazy is what we know about mankind is that we do things really quickly, right? You talk about the Industrial Revolution, right? Like we do things very rapidly. So what took thousands of years on these islands to achieve, we're going to reverse like this.
Yeah. Yeah, breeding facilities they take all of the pressures off of them, and it's just streamlined to reproduce as quickly as possible. Whereas, you know how it is in the wild. They might, male and female might be able to find each other. They might be able to mate. They might have a couple snakes survive out of a clutch that don't get eaten already. So
Right.
We're accelerating the stuff when we breed them in captivity. So.
Yep.
And we're doing the opposite with mainlands, right? A lot of people are maintenance feeding mainlands, and they don't want them to get
Yeah.
18, 16 foot. And so that's why we rarely see the 20-foot mainlands in this country anymore. It's because we're not giving them what they have access to on the islands. Very few people are feeding the retics goats and 25-pound pigs and small cattle that they are crushing in the wild.
Right.
Or back to what I was saying earlier too, look, Lucas, with my mainlands, the ones the same age, fed the exact same way, are not the same sizes. And it's not based on sex either. I have two females, one of them is a female. And like I said, she looks like a dwarf. You would not believe that she comes from mainland blood. So, but they're fed exactly the same. So even how they're going to process that food, even if it's equivalent, and how the individual bodies, we forget these animals are living beings just like us. So as you talk about your brothers and your sisters, your mom gave y'all the same food. Y'all ate the same plates, but y'all grew differently. And we don't, for some reason, the disconnect comes with animals, that we don't think that the biological functions happen the same.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to bring Chris into this. And I believe Chris and I have had discussion about the term super dwarf, and I believe that this is the reason I don't like to use these terms. Number one, because they're misleading, but it's nothing more than a marketing term. Is that correct, Chris?
So for me, like back when these things were coming in and we weren't getting the locality information, super dwarf and dwarf was a good term for it because it was a descriptive term to show the size or potential size of these animals. These days, I think that we should only be using that term maybe as a generalization, or if we're just talking about something, but we're not being specific. If I'm posting something, if it's an ad or even just a picture I'm posting on Facebook, I'm putting it's 50% Kalatoa, 50% Slayer, or 100% Slayer, whatever. I'm not using those dwarf and super dwarf terms because it doesn't, it doesn't show what the animal actually is. We used to think that super dwarfs we believed that they were going to be smaller than they were when we started mixing them with stuff and getting those crosses. And I think that's where a lot of that misinformation came from. And we just got to get away from that. We got to start putting out these actual sizes and genetics and start being more honest about these breedings that we're doing. I've got, 50% super dwarfs that are 15 foot long. Now,
right.
I produced those a long time ago and I fed them incorrectly. They're too big, but they can get huge. And people need to understand that. For years, I've posted my biggest 50% crosses to show people what these snakes can actually get to. Don't believe some of the hype that came out earlier on, 2015, 2014, stuff like that, where we thought these crosses were going to be 10 foot, 11 foot. And then, like Lucas was saying, they keep growing. People are breeding them at 4 or 5 years old, and they're like, well, the parents are 6 foot. They're still young. Yeah. They don't stop really growing significantly until they're like 8, 10 years old. Then it's really slow after that. So we just got to be more honest with the information, try to let people understand it a little bit better. And I think it'll kind of come around. People start understanding it better and seeing what these animals are really going to end up being like. But it's going to take a long time.
Right.
And if we keep feeding, they're going to get huge.
Yeah. I wanted to, Gary, before we move on to the next topic, one thing that I kind of just wanted to say, because I know a lot of this information that we're talking about might scare a lot of people that want to get into super dwarfs and dwarfs, and it might scare them, right? But like, I can't emphasize the importance that again, I'm assuming here that your ability to keep, an 8-foot enclosure is like, if you can do that, a 10-foot reticulated python is a pretty manageable animal for most people. And a lot of people think 10 feet and they're like, damn, that's twice the length of me. I can keep an 8.5, 9-foot retic. I can handle in one hand that goes up, my arm and onto my shoulder. Right. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm not trying to like scare people that these are, these massive, I mean, they're very manageable when they're in that 8 to 11 foot range. They're still, I've seen boas that were 7 feet that looked more like monsters than a 9-10 foot retic.
Right.
Yeah, retics are still going to be slender, especially with the super dwarf and dwarf.
But they're supposed to be, right, Chris?
Right. They're
even
not
the
supposed to
breeding
be
ones
fat.
supposed to be big muscles, not built like those. And that's another good point too, that Lucas just said. I say that all the time. I mean, and it's a reality for me. My retics are way more manageable. And when I mean manageable, I'm talking about overall, right? A boa outside the enclosure is way more manageable than a retic, right? But I'm talking about as far as going in. You will see me climb in my enclosure with a retic. You will never see that with a boa. His reaction is different. It's just different.
I'm opposite there.
My retics are so smart in that way where, they know, if I'm coming in on this side, right? I'm coming in to clean or whatever. I watch them move out my way, like literally move out the way and just watch me clean. I think the dialogue, having more of these conversations, and I knew this would be a fun one for me because like Lucas said, it's always this big mainland versus super dwarf. And listen, they're amazing animals. So if you want an amazing animal that you want to, if if you have the personality, because you need to have a big personality for whether it's a dwarf, super dwarf, or a retic, you have to want to engage with these animals to make them happy, number one. Because that's another thing I don't think that we talk about enough. Chris talked about how the F1s were. I've never experienced, I talk to Tim about this all the time, a retic that was like zooming out the enclosure at me and stuff like that. Have I had retics as babies who were a little ornery and they had to grow out of it? Yes. But I never had like some of the experience that like Tim has experienced. So that's another thing. When people come to me and they ask me how to manage a 16-foot angry snake, I can't help you. I refer them to Tim because mine's are little. I don't have these experiences. So that's another mistake that I think that people make. They're not all the same animals, period. I don't care what they are. I can have 10 retics that are amazing, but you can go somewhere else and get 10 retics that are not. And everybody keeping retics don't have the same experience. I'm not the person to come to tame down a 16-footer. I've never had a snake jump out at me like that, ever. But Tim has.
It's such a balancing act when I'm trying to do these educational videos and stuff. It really is a double-edged sword. And I say all the time, reticulated pythons, regardless of the size, are either the easiest animal you've ever worked with in your life, or it's the most terrifying experience you'll ever have in your life.
I've had some scary ones over the years.
100%. Yeah. It is 100% dependent on the history of that animal and the knowledge of the keeper.
Every once in a while, every once in a while, my Solaire still makes my ass pucker.
Oh yeah.
But what I will say, Tim, just to you regardless if it's the hard animal or the easy animal, your channel shows it in a very graceful way. So I'm very appreciative of your channel.
Yeah.
One of the things
in a graceful way because I can't find any mean snakes to work with.
Come on down, man.
That was one.
Come on down.
I need to.
What was the one that kept biting you? It was the one that
the Sri Lankan.
Yes,
yeah.
Sri Lanka. That series was interesting.
Yeah.
So my Sri Lankans don't bite me, but when I hold one of them, I'm doing this the whole time with it.
Yeah. Oh man, Bob was a terror, man. He was completely terrified when I first got him.
I had to stop watching your videos on Bob because I was about to get 2 in, and I was like, I don't want to watch this.
One of the things that I want to, as a retic owner, I think that if you keep retics, as pets, for me, for family members, it's a commitment. It's an absolute commitment. This isn't something that you get and you just, you pay minor attention to. I don't know about anybody else, but my retics, I pay full attention to them. And I know their behaviors. I have 11 different retics and they all do have different personalities, but I'll tell you what, all of them are puppy dog tame and all of them have lived in love and not fear. Right. And they display that, so again, it goes back to, when you're owning these animals, whether it's a 10-foot reticulated python or a 17-foot reticulated python, I think everything about that animal is going to depend on when you got it. If you got it when it was a baby or when you got it was as somebody's rescue, and how much time you spend with that animal, and that's one of the reasons I'm glad that I keep and I don't breed. It allows me that time to spend with each and every one of my animals independently and give them the time and the attention that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't see how people do a lot of breeding of them. I will tell you, for me, I will always breed them. I won't tell that lie, but it will be like one clutch every 2 years or something like that. Because even with the babies, I enjoy raising up the babies that I hold back and watching them in comparison to how their parents were when I grew them up and, things like that. Like even talking about comparing them to the mom and dad. I'm seeing babies who are growing bigger at the pace than their mom and dad did. I'm seeing babies in that same clutch who's growing slower. So being able to document that part, I do love the documentational part and the educational part of the breeding side more than the selling of the animals. That's not my priority. I'm not in that for this. For me, of course, it's great when we can and we do, but for me, it's not my number one source of income, right? My dream was to to be home to study these animals, to show people that these animals, although massive, can be very generous, kind animals to keep, and that they also no different from any other animal in the sense of if you love on it, it'll respect and love on you back. And what I mean by that, because I know some people don't think they have emotions, mine do. I see emotional snakes, and I will argue that with anybody. Try putting back a retic who didn't want to go back and watch them come through that enclosure and look at you mad as hell or sad as hell and watch you like, come on now, like having a whole negotiation with their eyes with you. That is definitely emotional.
Yeah, I've said it before, man. Anything that can feel fear can feel contentment.
Yeah.
You can scare a snake.
If anybody knows the story of, if anyone knows the story of Cora, and when I first got her to where she's at now, that animal hated my guts when I got her. And
I remember talking with you about her when you first got her.
Yeah, consistency has put that animal like I can, like Nicole was talking about. I kiss her on the head, you know, and she doesn't try to get away from me. And maybe it's my own perception, but I can feel the emotion between me and that animal. She's like my best friend, you know. So let's talk about behaviors. I know that, like for instance, myself, I do own mixed localities. I own a pure from Lucas, and I own straight Mainlands. And I definitely see a difference in behaviors, meaning that like my larger Mainlands, they'll wrap on me, but they get curious and they're just kind of trying to go places while they're wrapped on me. Whereas if I have my pure Coyote out, it just wants to go. And it's just, that's its nature. It just wants to go, go, go. And then I've got mixed localities like Georgia and Cora, and I've got Celia, that's a 50% Slayer, 25% unknown super dwarf that also, she's very much on the go, yet then she gets settled down and then she can get on the go. But has anybody noticed different behavior types or styles between owning a pure locality reticulated python versus a mixed locality reticulated python versus a mainland reticulated python? So Chris, we're going to start with you on this one.
Oh, for sure. So I've had a little bit of everything over the years. Wild caughts aside, I do think that certain localities kind of act a certain way, and I'm sure Lucas can attest to this with the Slayers, where they're either super chill, or you can have some that like one day they just want to like tear you up, the next day they're sweethearts. Kind of got to be on your toes with them. But by far my favorite locality, I love working with them. And then the Mainlands. I mean, most Mainlands that have been around a while, they're super chill. I mean, they're big puppy dogs. Just a lot of weight, a lot of snake, but they're fun to work with. They're beautiful animals. And then the super dwarfs, stuff like that, even the crosses, they're quicker. You know, they want to move. I haven't had as many bitey super dwarfs as like wild caught-ish Mainlands, but they're real quick and real flighty. And you know, the longer they're in captivity, the better off they are. They calm down a lot more. We handle them like Gary versus myself. You can tell a snake that came from me usually because it's a little bit more quick to run. But as they age, I handle them a lot more, and they calm down. But I mean, they all have different personalities. It's not just about the localities of them. It's, you know, like everybody keeps saying, if you got them when they're babies and work with them, they're typically going to be nice animals. I always suggest people to get babies. That way you can grow with that animal versus getting a sub-adult or adult. It's already kind of set in its ways, and you have to take on that challenge like Gary did with Cora. You know,
that can be daunting.
Yeah.
Although I would tell you, my Retic babies, though every clutch that I had, they were amazing. Now these Burms, they funny. Yeah, they're different. But I mean, again, that's another misconception. You know, people think that the Retics are going to bite you as babies. I've never been bit by a baby Retic. I've been bit by ball pythons. I get bit by ball pythons weekly.
I've been bit by thousands of baby Retics.
But yeah,
I just got to reach in and get them though. Like I don't like using tools and hooks and stuff like that with babies. I try to get them to get that confidence with me and know that I'm not going to hurt them. So I just kind of, you know, get behind them, gently pick them up. If they bite me, they bite me. I was able to do that
with the baby Retics, but the baby Burms, they like, yeah.
light you up.
Yeah,
Yep.
just stick this hand in here. I dare you.
How about you, Tim, with your animals? I know that you keep Mainlands, but any noticeable behavior differences between them, or anything?
They've got distinct personalities. And anybody can argue with me all day long. They're wrong. Snakes have distinct personalities, which their minds work. And it's so funny because, like, when I got my big female, I've had her since she was big enough to fold up on my arm, and it is what it is. We got a great relationship. My male, who he's between 16 and 17 feet, he's the biggest male I've worked with before. But I got him when he was 12 feet long and terrified of people. I seen him at a shop out there, and I was like, okay, this snake's got to go. I got to get him out of here. And start working with. He was popping at the glass in the store, and nobody would take him. You couldn't sell him to anybody. You couldn't treat the snake right. The guy was really a tool. But I got the snake home. Very first time I opened up the door, that snake shot across the enclosure trying to get me. I jumped back, screamed like a girl, and he jumped out of the enclosure and shot out like 6-7 feet right after me, man. Literally chased me out of the enclosure.
Wow.
And then after, I started handling him with a leather jacket on, just in case. Did that once or twice, just for my own peace of mind. I didn't use gloves or anything like that, and just started working with him, supporting him. And it didn't take a month of working with that animal. And, fast forward to when he's 16 feet long, out in the backyard, running around in the grass. He sees somebody walking across the yard that he doesn't recognize. He literally comes straight to me, crawls up, and sits on my shoulder looking at the guy.
Yep.
Just, stranger danger. I don't know this guy. This is my sense of security out here. And he came to me. And so I don't know, man. You'll see, people ask, well, what's the temperament of a berm versus a retic versus... And it's hard to say because it depends entirely on the snake's history and who the keeper is.
Yep.
You're going to have snakes that are going to be bullheaded or just traumatized by somebody to the point that you really can't pull them all the way out of it. Those things do exist. I try and be optimistic about everything, but there are kind of lost causes. I had one snake, a 20-footer, that was so dangerous that it never really got handled. There's a top and bottom enclosure. I took a big plastic bin and I'd take it out. I'd screw it to the side of the enclosure, open both of the doors, and let him just go from one enclosure to the other one on his own. Nobody touched him. Clean the enclosures that way.
I know exactly which snake you're talking about too.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably do. But and I'm the one that developed that, because when a snake is that terrified and hates people that much, fighting with them does no good.
Nope.
I used to have big cages with dividers so that I could put the divider in for my wild caught stuff, clean one side at a time.
Yeah,
Some stuff you got to do.
Yeah. I do the food ordeal. If I've had snakes, like the way that I was able to manage my wild caught Calato when I first got her. She wasn't the greatest, and so I would feed her a small meal. She'd bite wrap. I'd put her in a holding tub. I'd clean up her enclosure. I would wait 20 minutes. She'd be done with that meal. I'd open up the tub. I'd give her another small meal. She'd bite and wrap, and then I'd put her back in a clean enclosure. And now I could literally let a 10-year-old hold her.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. If you've got the time to devote to them, I think you can bring them around.
Yeah. I think that first year is important. And I always tell people, when you talk about, I recommend babies because you know the history of that baby, most likely. Even if you get it at 3 months, 4 months old, not much probably happened, that traumatized it. But I think that what happens in that first year is what determines what is going to be, or how it's going to adapt to people. And so from the egg, the first time the head comes out, I just start touching it. the retics very specifically. But I wanted to add when handling these animals, because a lot of times people try to make it seem like, you know, you're a punk if you use a glove, if you use this. It's all about confidence. So if you're dealing with any animal and you got to put on a suit or whatever the case may be, like with my Asian water monitors, when I first started dealing with them, I always put on a big hoodie, you know, because if it did bite, I didn't want it to go right into my skin. But that confidence going into that made the interaction so much easier for us both, which then in turns make the animal better, you know, respect and appreciate you as well, because it understands that you're being kind and gracious and empathetic in that approach. So I always say to people, and you know, me and Tim talks about this, like for a long time in the beginning when I started doing videos, I was more focused on showing people that you can handle these animals this way, right? And without the hook and all of that type of stuff. So I flipped it to show you may need to handle it this way too, even though that's not my experience, right? Because most people may come across like the snakes that Chris experienced, you know, most of them may not come across the snakes that you and I experienced, Gary. So I had to flip that. And that was a conscious decision. So we are as responsible keepers of these animals, like you have to. I watch plenty of people videos, and I know people watch mine too. But if you're watching them to just take blank information from it and not take, you know, some of the information or things that are said, you got to take that criticism with weight, right? And so there's a lot of people like Tim always respected what I did. I cannot remember what the incident was, Tim, that brought it up, but when we had that conversation, and I know Gary, you and I had it too before, it made me say, okay, you know what, as a keeper and lover of these animals, it is very important that, yes, I want the world to see that they're not the evil, mean beast that people try to make it all seem to be. But I want them to see, if you do come across one, you know, this is the right approach. So I started taking it from that approach myself. I'm sorry, but we have to be very conscious of that when we're talking about these animals and understand the difference. I know for me, I have to be conscious of it because, like I said, I've never experienced, like I can go in my snake's mouth, you know, like I don't have, and let me tell you a story. My vet won't go in my snake's mouth as fast as I will. Like literally the cow, when we had to take her, I opened her mouth so he can do what he needed to do, because her reaction to me, like Tim said, was different. This is a strange man. She was wrapping around his leg, holding on tight. Not that she was, you know, trying to harm him. She was a little more nervous. With me, it's like, okay, my mother go in my mouth all the time. And she just opened the mouth, and he will go in there and do what he got to do and stuff like that. And so for me, even that experience, taking my animals, you know, to the vets and, you know, give them their checkups and stuff like that, which I don't know how often people do that. I can't do it every year like some people do. I try to do with the breeding ones more often, but I wish I can take my entire collection to the vet every year. I'm not going to sit here and lie to anyone and say that I do. But with the retics, I try, because I think that their health makes a big difference in how they are engaging with people as well. And my grandkids handle them, and I always want to know that they're in good health. So that's a little it's different with them.
Yeah, there's kind of talking about the different behaviors too, and some trouble. Most of the people that have contacted me to do the video chat, like handling coaching and stuff, they've taken everybody's advice. They've gotten the retics as babies. They've raised them up to 12, 14, 16 feet, whatever the case may be. Maybe they've gotten 3 or 4 of them, and they've got 3 or 4 retics that they've raised from babies. And then they say, okay, well, somebody's got a snake that they're, you know, trying to rehome, trying to find a home for.
Right.
And this person says, well, I got retics. I'm a retic handler. I got it covered. I've got retics at home. They're great. And they get this snake, and it's defensive for whatever reason. And it acts differently than the ones that they've raised their whole life. And they start wondering what they're doing wrong. And, you know, those are the times when they message me and they're like, man, I don't get this. I've got 3 other snakes and I've got they've never bit at me or anything like that. This snake wants to kill me. And, you know, they've never had to do the, to manage a snake that's actually trying to wrap you up, trying to bite at you and things like that, trying to fight you off. So that's one of the things that I tell folks too, when we're talking about the snake behavior, is it's always good to try to encourage people if they're going to get into retics, and it's not always easy to do. You're not always close to somebody else that keeps them. But if you can get around somebody you trust that you can work with their animals as well, that is a huge, huge, huge thing.
Right.
100%.
And just like Nicole says, she raises her animals right. She raises them from a young age. She knows she doesn't have to fight them at all ever. And that's the side of retics that that's easy. That's the way that's our goal. That's what we want to make them. But we will see people getting in there. They get comfortable with theirs and they think, okay, retic's a retic. No.
Right.
Right.
Having a mentor that you can talk to before you get into retics, maybe go over and clean some cages, just kind of get used to being around them. That's the best way to go. I've tried to help as many people as I can. Like Tim said, I mean, you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start winding this down here pretty quickly with almost an hour and a half. I did see a question come up. Jeremy put a question up on the screen. I don't know if anybody wants to go at it. The question was, what do I do if a retic bites me? I did not to pull away.
Gary, I cannot comment to that because I am the biggest wuss when it comes to being bit. But what I will say is, after we go around with this, I do want to speak a little bit about behavior of just because I keep so many different localities. But I if anybody I'm sitting here now as a student. If anyone knows the tip to not yanking back and being a wuss on how to not flinch when a snake strikes, let me know, because even my baby retics, I don't want to get bit by. Chris is like, oh, I get bit 1,000 million times, and I'm like, not me. Like I don't like, not me.
So before we answer this question, I'd like Lucas to talk about the behaviors, and then we can answer this question.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to. So it's really cool because I think that so everything that we've been talking about for the last 10, 15 minutes on this topic is absolutely true. I also, start off with the baby if you can. I was also the idiot who kept a retic for a year and then was like, let's get a pair of wild caught retics. That was stupid. Don't do that. But
it's a good learning curve.
I tell people to this day that the first year of keeping those wild caught retics, communally have taught me more than my entire span of keeping retics. So I also think that learning about behavior about retics doesn't just come from longevity, but it comes from a number of animals because you deal with different personalities. True. But I think that locality, in my experience with keeping so many of them, plays a very important part in behavior. I cannot tell you. So my two Kalatoa clutches and my Coyote clutch that I produced, and even my Solaire clutch, 99% of those animals very chilled, very laid back right out of the egg. They're goers, they run in your hand, and that's just kind of like their behavior, their defense mechanism, right? So when we think about behavior, especially when it comes down to our downstairs brain, that amygdala, that fight, flight, or freeze response, first and foremost, I think that everybody's conceptualization of snake behavior is mostly subjective to their observation. Because what we know about most animals is that they function very much so in that fight, flight, or freeze part of their brain. And it's when they feel safe, like Gary, you mentioned, fostering a home of love and support for the animals, that they tend to drop that fight, flight, or freeze, and then they get into that upstairs brain and start thinking, right? And what's beautiful is you can see a retic go from fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? So anybody who's opened up a retic enclosure, you have a snake that'll pounce at you, that's fight mode. You have a snake that just sits there frozen, that's freeze mode. Or you have a snake that when you grab it out, it's just running away and you're trying to grab it out of and that's flight mode, right? But the moment that they feel safe, you start to see them in their thinking brain. And when you see a retic thinking, it's the most beautiful thing ever. Yeah. And so when it comes to locality stuff, there's different behaviors that I've experienced. And I want to just touch on the Maluku region retics that I keep, as well as this also kind of applies for the Mindanao, Philippines that I keep as well. But you can be holding these animals, right? And this doesn't happen with any other locality besides my Ternates, Halmaheras, and I think it's happened on one or two, probably a handful of occasions with my Mindanao, Philippines. But I could be holding a Kalatoa, a Salayer. I could put that Salayer or Kalatoa or Kayuwati back in its enclosure. Everything's fine and dandy. One big staple behavior that I've noticed that's very different with the Ternate and the Halmahera locality specifically is that you can have a phenomenal 5-10 minute long handling session with them. And as soon as you get them back into their enclosure and they're kind of, you're supporting that lower third as they're going into their enclosure, very frequently. And I'm talking about frequently to the point where when I put them back in their enclosure, I no longer support their lower third, but they just go into food mode. The moment that they're back in that enclosure and you're supporting their lower half, and all of a sudden you feel your hand like just tightening up without blood flow to your hand, and they're coming back at you just like ready to eat. And it might even be a defense response and not so much a food response, but like all of my Ternates and my Halmaheras have that this weird shift that happens that sometimes when they're in their enclosure, but they still have contact to you, they all of a sudden just shift into this like food mode like behavior. And I've had a lot of close calls, but people think that Ternates and Halmaheras can be nasty animals and a little bit more defensive than some of the other localities. And I will say as hatchlings, 80% of the time that is true. But most people that have gotten Halmaheras over the years, they talk about how difficult they are to handle, and their food response is insane, which they are. But I got Halmaheras very young. They were less than a year old, and they're some of my easiest animals to work with in my collection. And so just to validate what Nikki and Tim and Chris were saying, that and even you, Gary, when you foster a good relationship with the animal, you take the time to observe their behavior, you take the time to learn the nuances, and ultimately it's making them feel secure and safe. It doesn't matter what locality, what generation they are removed from the wild. You can have a good relationship because retics, they use their brain. And then one last thing that I also wanted to kind of say is we talk about how snakes are able to sense heat, right? And one thing just from my background and my profession, outside of snakes of being a therapist is I know that when humans are anxious, or humans kind of are in a fight, flight, or freeze mode themselves, our bodies send blood to our vital organs, and in our extremities, our arms and our legs have less blood, which means less heat, right? And so I can't help but think that if our body temperature changes and they're able to see a grid of body temperature, that they not only see the reservation of behavior from the human being timid, but they also see heat being distributed in different areas. And so it's so important that you do the best that you can to take a few breaths if you're anxious, if you're nervous, to appear confident, and really do your best to relax as you're opening up even a defensive Retics enclosure, because they not only see you, they sense your temperature, and they sense the reservation that you have. I did this early on in keeping. I would go to one side of the enclosure and then go to the other side of the enclosure and then go to back to the, like I'm dancing back and forth, and this retic is looking at me like, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Right? like, and then you open up the enclosure and they're flying out at you. And it's like, well, you were just tormenting them going back and forth for 5 minutes. So
not half stepping with them at all.
Exactly.
That's the key to having good experiences, that confidence. Whether you know what you're doing or not, or whether you know you're getting ready to fight or not, you got to be confident.
Exactly.
That's the only way. That's the only way it'll go good.
And if you're new with retics and you have a snake that you're not confident with, the best thing that I can recommend is put that enclosure where you have 6-7 feet behind you, and you're not in like a tiny room. Open up the enclosure, take 5 steps back, and let the snake think. Let you open up the enclosure. The snake is like, wait, this person hasn't hurt me. This person hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
And just let the snake get into that upstairs brain and start to think.
Time is always your friend.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tack on one thing really quick. I know you want to move on, Gary. But one way that I started looking at things a little bit differently a while back, and maybe it'll help some folks that are thinking about working with their snakes to kind of look at it this way, is we talk about wild snakes and wild caught, and it's always a source of anxiety. We think we got a fight on our hands. But the fact of the matter is that we want our snakes to act the same way they do in the wild. That's our goal, is to get that wild demeanor, because if you watch them in the wild, when they're not being predated or if they're not hunting, you can see they're always exploring. They're always thinking. They're comfortable in their environment. And the only time they get stressed is, if they see a meal come up, or if they see the opportunity of something's trying to chase them and predate them. So it's like when we work with them, we want to get them to that state that they are in the wild, who they naturally are as an animal. We're not taming them. We're not, changing what they are. We're learning how to communicate with them and make them comfortable so that they can have that demeanor that they would naturally have in the wild, except they have it with their keeper instead. So.
And the other part, and I'll add to that I really think that people, and I always consider, we never consider the what ifs, right? So I always say that I want my animals to have some wild instincts, because, and that's why I take them outside. Not all the time, but I do. It's important. If my home was to catch on fire, the only way I probably can give them a chance is open up enclosures, windows, and doors, and they get out. You see what I'm saying? If they get out, they need to know how to survive for that little bit of time that it's going to take, or a lot of time that it's going to take for us to be able to locate them, to save their lives. And if we don't locate them, they end up in the waters or whatever the case. I want them to live as long as they possibly can. I say that about people who clip lizards' nails and stuff. What if that lizard has to climb? Like, what if it has to use its natural instinct to climb that wall, that tree, or whatever, to protect itself from some natural disaster? It's something that we don't think about, but it's something that can happen. So I'm really big on letting them see water outside, taking them to the park and letting them see the lakes. Now, what I'm not big on is letting them get close enough to swim across the lake and never come back. I see people do that. And hey, shout out to you. I just don't think my snakes are that loyal to me that they're just going to take the swim and come back.
All right, you guys, I got a couple more questions for this. I know that there's been some questions on the screen. Lucas, there was one about the Halmahera reticulated python. If it's local, if it's an Indonesian locality. I don't know if you want to answer that real quick.
Yeah, it's part of the Maluku region of Indonesia, so it's over on the west side of Indonesia. If you look up Halmahera Ternate on a map, it's going to be pretty far west of like the Jampea and the Lesser Sunda Islands and Sulawesi. But yeah, they are in Indonesia.
And from this point, I'm never going to say Ternate again. I like that. Ternate. I like it. That's what
I'm going to be honest. I go back and forth a lot. I've been on a roll tonight with saying it correctly.
Okay. That's how it's going to be said going forward. I like it.
All right, you guys. So we got 2 more questions real quick. And the next question is, where do you all see yourselves in the next 5 years of keeping? And I ask you this question because it's a question I ask myself. It's an actual, I'm actually taking action in this. We get older. These animals are commitments. And as I get older, I see that, the number that I kept when I was 38 or 40 is not the same number I want to keep when I'm 54. So, and plus, I've got some other things that I've added in my collection. So I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm planning for. I love this, what Jordan just put out here about the emergency plan. You can talk about that, but where do you guys see yourselves in the next 5 years of keeping? with reticulated pythons, or if you've got an area you want to change to. Lucas, go ahead.
So I've talked about this quite a bit on the Retic Lounge, and just anybody who's on the Discord and anybody who's in my circle, I've kind of talked about it a bit. But you know, when I originally got into this, I was naive and was, you know, I'm gonna breed Retics as my full-time job. Anyone listening to this, don't do that. Too much overhead and expense, right? But and to keep, I mean, everybody that I have seen that goes into this full time is either massively stressed out or ultimately the well-being of the animals ends up suffering, right? And if we all go off the model that we all preach and say, like, this is about the animals, then don't put your family before the animal when you have to feed your family with the animals that you're producing. I know that a lot of people do that, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but with reticulated pythons in general, it's not the best idea. So with that being said, I grew my collection really fast. And like I mentioned very early on in the podcast, I started getting into other species. And so really what my goal is I would like to breed every locality that we have accessible here in the US. We can't import anymore, right? So I'd like to do that as a personal locality, like just freak. I'd like to be able to do that. But as I do that, I'm moving out Retics and I'm making space for others, making sure that they go into good homes. And I'm never in a rush to sell a sub-adult or an adult Retic ever. You're going to get vetted, and really because I've you know, I've started working with my favorite species of snakes, which is chondros, and started getting other species. Like I really want to, Nikki, I know why you're laughing. We talk about it all the time with MJ, but yeah. So with the Retics, I've been slowly downsizing. I really have, and that's just because I've realized that there's other snakes that I love and have a passion for that I can knock out probably. I can see the police is out to get me because they don't like what I'm saying right now.
I thought they were coming after me first.
Yeah. So no, but the reality of it is that keeping a large group of Retics is just really, really difficult. And I've learned that over the last 6.5 years. And so I'm downsizing in the Retics. I can clean 20 green tree python enclosures at the time it takes me to clean 2 8-foot Retic enclosures. And I'm sure Tim can vouch that.
Yeah, I can roll through some enclosures now.
Exactly. And so
I can clean some damn enclosures.
Exactly. I'm never going to get away from the Retics. But I do plan to downsize as I produce localities. I will move localities out. I will bring new ones in. And yeah, so, you know, in 5 years, I definitely won't breed every locality that there is, but that's a goal.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucas. How about you, Chris?
So, I mean, over the past few years, I've downsized quite a bit and grown my enclosures, tried to do better for the snakes. And that's kind of my plan, excuse me, is to continue that. I'm not going to get rid of too many more Retics, but I have a few that I'm going to let go of. And that's just going to be my collection from here on out. I don't really plan on bringing a whole lot of stuff in or, you know, chasing different morphs and stuff. I'm just going to kind of do my thing now. And once producing doesn't really make sense, you know, once the stuff that I make, you know, people don't really want, I'll just quit breeding and just enjoy my collection. And I did want to touch on the biting thing without pulling away. Start with babies. That's the way to go. It could really help you down the road. My wife actually got bit here recently by about a 12-foot male. She was helping me because I can't, you know, really mess with the snakes from my shoulder right now. She got bit on the hand, wrapped up, but she did great. She didn't pull back, and there wasn't very much damage done. Where if you pull back from a snake that big, it can mess you up bad. Mm-hmm. So it's beneficial to go ahead. I know it sucks at first, and you're gonna flinch, but start with those babies. I've been keeping
do
for
this one.
yeah, I've been keeping for a little over 20 years, so it's a little bit easier for me to say this because I've been bit so much, and it's just kind of common practice for me now. But start with the small stuff, kind of get used to it. Obviously, don't try to get bit by your bigger stuff, but it'll become more natural. It'll be easier to not jerk back. It's still hard to do, but it could definitely help.
I don't think there's anything natural about being bit, man.
It's the craziest thing. Sometimes you just have to watch it happen.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Like I said, my babies, I just don't care.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how big of a snake is that you're working with, it just, I think it's just like anything else. Until it happens the first time and you actually understand what it's like, what it feels like, what it's like to have 16 feet of constrictor trying to wrap you up with all 6 rows of teeth in you. Once you have that happen, and then the next day you can hardly see the bite and you survived, your confidence level goes up a little bit, and you don't think the snake's going to kill you anymore. It's okay. Well, oh shit, this is coming. Wow. Okay. This is what we got to do. And you do what you got to do. And I think until you get that first really big bite, you're going to flinch. You're going to be terrified of it because you don't know what to expect, so.
Or you could be like me, that you've been bit probably 10 times and still are terrified of getting bit. I'm going to throw that out there.
Funny thing
Give it another 50 to 100.
Yeah. My little female hognose makes me jump like a freaking scared chicken every time I go in there. I'll go in and she's looking at me and playing with her tongue, and I'll be like, okay, girl, let's get your what? And I just freaking.
I don't fear the bites at all.
That's the first time I ever seen a snake. Every time.
Yeah, the only thing intimidating for me is chondros. That's why
when chondros are roosting, when those things are roosting, and I got some wild caught imports that are not nice, and I'm scared more of the chondros than I am the retics.
I mean, that's a fact for me. You know that, Tim.
I thought you were doing really good. I seen you handle him. He's good.
Right. He's much better, but he still have moments that I'm like, what is wrong with you?
I remember when you got that for first time, very first time you got it, first day.
When I tell you that thing used to have Jesus. And my husband would say, because my husband, he's not big on the snakes, but what he did, you could not comprehend. It's like, you go in there, but you scared this little thing.
This tiny little snake, right?
I'm like, he ready.
Yep.
They
will fight you.
Yep, they will.
Oh, so
how about you?
Mine. So for me, I'm in a fortunate situation, and because I fortunately planned my life that way, but it's not based on selling reticulated pythons, because I vet everyone. In fact, I will hold snakes forever if I have to, but I don't intend on adding, I'm not buying retics, right? Like adults or anything like that. The animals I have will be with me, but I would agree, as they pass away. I used to have a thing. If an animal passed away, I had to replace it. I won't be doing that with the retics. Like I can't. I don't have the capacity to do it. But I also feel like where I'm at with breeding, I breed a lot of ball pythons as well. I don't ever want to lose that experience that I get with my retics every day, that I get too many where I'm not giving them that, or let me say, they're not giving me that love and attention that I need, because I don't think it's about them at all. I think it's me, that I'm not giving them that love and attention that they need. So as they, God forbid, one day leave this earth, and I hope it's no time soon, I won't replace any. But I definitely will always keep, the babies I'm growing up. I will always have retics in my collection because I'll always produce them for myself. But I won't replace the adults as like I used to. Like if someone dies, I got to get another retic. No, I wouldn't do that.
Thank you. Tim, how about you?
Oh, my 5-year plan? No idea.
1 mil on YouTube.
Yeah, no idea. Whatever opportunities present themselves. The only thing that I do know is, after 3 years of doing the YouTube thing, they've got a really solid, really cool community put together. Made a lot of friends over it, and it's done some good. So whatever I end up doing, I want to keep doing this, in one way, shape, or form. I'm starting to mix in some wildlife photography in with it as well.
I was gonna say, I cannot wait to see what your photography portfolio looks like in 5 years, because you haven't been doing it long, and some of the pictures of the eagles that you took look phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, amazing. Yeah,
you're gonna have to give it 3 months. 3 months, I'm gonna have some stellar stuff in there, because I just happen to live an hour away from 25 bald eagle nests.
Oh, geez.
And the feeding ground where they all swarm at.
That's cool.
So, as soon as fall hits, and when they start opening up the sluiceway on that dam, the photographers that I've talked to that have worked that area before said there will be 10, 20 of them just bouncing between the trees, stealing fish out of each other's hands, diving down left, right, and center. So I put a lot of work into it, and a lot of time. It's cut into my video production time. But yeah, it's something. I keep thinking with my channel, it's really kind of tricky, because I've got such a small, narrow niche. It's just handling and behavior and stuff like that. And, I work between a couple different species on it, but after 3 years, there's only so much stuff you can talk about in regards to that. I don't breed. I don't have a zoo or anything like that to walk around. I don't have the Brian Barczyk facility or nothing like that. So, like, what can I do differently? And I was like, well, it's exotics. It's not pigeonholed to snakes. So I decided to just start throwing in more of the wildlife stuff and just expand it to everything and see how much stuff we can put out. And it's been a lot of fun, but we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of unexpected things happened here, particularly over the last couple of weeks. So I've just got to chase whichever opportunity I can make at the moment. And if I can find a good one that allows me to do bigger things with the channel and the animals, then awesome. If it doesn't, then I'll just keep getting by and keep, keep making the content.
Right.
Well, I appreciate you guys and what you guys do for the retic community and the reptile community in general. This will be the last question. Actually, it's more of a statement. And I'm going to ask each of you to let everybody know where they can find you. And then I would like you to drop a US SARC message. So Nicole, we'll start with you. Where can we find you? And tell us about US SARC.
Okay. You can find me on LadyTis Exotics, Instagram, LadyTis Exotics on Facebook, LadyTis Exotics on TikTok, which that's where I do a lot of my educational stuff, because people appreciate it so much there, even people who don't even keep snakes. So I enjoy that forum. But everything is LadyTis Exotics, and also on YouTube. Now, I don't do as many of the educational videos anymore, because I just got burnt out from that. But I do my podcast on every Monday, which with my co-host Miss Exotics. And although it's not a retic show, it always ends up, because we both passionate about retics, but we do a lot of educational. Reptile anatomy was a really good one we recently did. Just kind of get people to understand, how animals process their food and all that type of stuff. US SARC. Y'all, I don't know if you've seen, there's a new challenge came out to us that was posted yesterday, which scares the crap out of me. And Gary, we had this conversation before. Like, one of my biggest fears is government coming in and saying we can't keep the animals. And the reason why I fear so much, and Lucas, you are a therapist, I will go crazy. And I'm talking about seriously. I don't even know. Like, I can't imagine life without them. And I'm dead serious when I say that. So that's one of my biggest fears. So my message is, y'all, everybody read that, understand it, comprehend it. Let's get prepared to write out congressmen. And I think this might be one that we might be showing up in Washington for if it goes that far. So just be ready to support US SARC any way that we can. Just be mindful, just to make sure that, you are up to date on your memberships and things like that. Because I personally figured out that I could still get into US SARC thinking my membership was active, and it wasn't. I'm like, wait a minute, I had 2. but I didn't know because I can still see everything, right? So that's something I recently learned. So I'm just sharing that for you know, keep up with your notifications of your different memberships if you have multiple, and just, you know, support the cause. I Some people keep animals because they love them, and I keep them for that reason too. But they are a big part of my sanity every single day. Like they're a big part of me wanting to be alive every single day. So just really support, because US Arc, it's life or death for some of us. There are people who keep animals who they would be strung out on drugs in prison. You hear that. You know, I would be in jail if it wasn't for my snakes, or I would have killed myself if it wasn't for my snakes. You know what I'm saying? That's big. That's big. So we have to really remember that, and let's fight hard on this one, because I really enjoy these animals.
Thank you, Nikki. Tim, what about you?
So yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. It's Intrepid Exotics on everything. Intrepid Exotics on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I also got the website online. Still some things I'm working to add to it, but I do have the wildlife photography catalog on here. You go to www.intrepidexotics.com, wildlife photography tab, and I've got a catalog that I'm building there with some stuff. So if you enjoy that kind of stuff, that's cool. A couple things about US Arc is really Phil can't do everything. He can do a lot, and he can give us a lot of the tools, but we need to get a membership, keep up with the alerts, take action when they ask for it, and stay the hell off the 5 o'clock news.
Yes, for real.
Right.
Do those things right there.
Right.
Piece of cake. Gravy.
Yeah.
Awesome, Tim. Thanks. Lucas.
Yeah. So if you guys want to follow just my personal experience with keeping and breeding, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Live Exotics. Hopefully by mid-October, I'll be launching my website, liveexotics.net. And I am also a co-creator of the Reptile Lounge Network. That's where you can find the Retic Lounge and the Conjure Lounge that I both co-host on YouTube, Spotify, just about every other audio podcast platform. Also, we are looking to expand for anybody that is listening. If you guys have wanted a podcast idea, we want to expand species, and it doesn't just have to be reptiles. We're also talking about invertebrates, things like that. Just reach out to me. Our mission is just to educate and bring community together. We would love to talk to anybody who wants to consider starting a podcast, because we want to get more information out there on different animals with education. So yeah, that's the Reptile Lounge Network, where you can find the 2 podcasts on YouTube. And yeah, my message about US Arc is they need support. That's the only way that they keep going. Something that I've done is a percentage of sales that I make go to US Arc. That's something that you guys can decide to do if you're breeding. You can become a member. You can use multiple emails. You can ask family members to just, if you could use their email and hit the confirm button when they get that email. I've also told people on the podcast before, if you guys cannot pay for a bronze membership, reach out to me and Nathan on the Retic Lounge or on the Reptile Lounge Network. Let us know. We'll be happy to help. You guys would not believe what numbers do when it comes to showing that we are, there's what's crazy is that the reptile industry in the world is billions and billions of people. But you look at the US Arc members, and you look at their YouTube channel, and we're not even hitting 5% of people that keep reptiles as a member. And so those numbers, even the subscribers they have on YouTube, go a long way to show the body and the voice that we have. And then my last comment about US Arc, for those of you that are listening and have issues with US Arc, whether it's the past or the present or the future, talk to Phil. He's a good guy to talk to. Will hear you out. If you think that they're doing something that is not for the greater good of reptile and exotic pet keepers, just speak your mind, and he's going to take that information. So if there's something that you're unhappy with, just reach out to them, talk to them, get to know the people that are actually working for US Arc, and see if what you're frustrated with can be changed or can be implemented. There's no reason why you shouldn't support them because of a history or because of something that they might not be doing. Just reach out to them and have a good conversation with them.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lucas. Chris.
So on Facebook, it's Chris McVicar. Instagram, Chris McVicar 2. I have a little bit of TikTok. It's Christopher McVicar. I believe is what it is on there. Once my shoulder's healed up, I'm going to start doing more videos. But like my shirt says, US Art. I'm pretty sure every podcast I've ever done, I've had it on. I've been supporting them pretty much since they started up. They're the only ones out there fighting for us. So memberships, donations if you can. Get your family to join. Most of my family has joined up. Like those numbers really mean a lot. Like everybody else has said, when we're fighting, if we're not showing there's actually people that care about these animals, why would anybody else care?
Right.
If we can get those memberships up, it shows our strength.
Right.
It shows how many people care for this kind of
right.
people. So just support it any way you can.
And
Keep
from
up with the alerts.
Yeah, from a political standpoint, that's what they look at, because politicians only get in office through votes. So the first thing they're going to look at is how many of these people do I have to count on to get to the next position or the next office or to remain in office. So we are, although a very small, 1% of the community of the world, but we still a big number. And to a politician, if that number is 1 billion people, if it's 1 million people, that's a big number. It makes a difference. So it's about the number. You don't even have to be active. Just be a member.
Yep. Yep.
I'm extremely adamant and passionate about US Arc. You guys said everything that I wanted to say, but like Nikki just said, I believe that the numbers are what matters. The more members we have, the greater our base. The better we look when Phil goes and fights these laws that people want to impose on reptile keeping in general. So I too will give or help anybody out that needs a free US Arc bronze membership. The only thing that I ask is that you save the $40 to re-up your membership the following year. If we had, I don't know how many memberships I've given away, but I know that makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. So if anybody is looking for a membership, I don't care what your situation is. I'm not going to ask you what your situation is. There is a couple of things that you need to do, but if I will help you get that bronze membership. Before we close this, I'm going to bring Jeremy in. I want Jeremy to everybody say thank you to Jeremy.
Thank you.
Jeremy has been behind the scenes.
Done an amazing job.
Everything tonight. I really appreciate it. You really made everything easy and just very, very just easy for us tonight, Jeremy. And real quick, where can we find you? And shout out for US Arc as well.
World of Wilcox. Hang on 1 second. One sec. TV is loud. World of Wilcox on Instagram, YouTube.
That was the best way this could have ended.
You can look me up on Facebook at Jeremy Wilcox. It's JEREMEY. That's pretty much all I've got. As far as US Art goes, like everybody said, they're our voice. If there's only 15 members, they stand for those 15. If there's 100,000 members, they stand for those 100 behind them, or what give them the loud voice. We run a rescue. I wouldn't be able to do this and make these animals safe if it wasn't for US Art. So everybody reach out to Gary. Let's break him.
Put Gary in the poorhouse.
There are several of us that will back him up on this. my very first year was purchased by Gary. That's been passed on at once that I've passed that on, and plus we have both the wife and I have our own memberships, and we will be going silver and hopefully gold in the next couple of years. We got to have them, guys. We've got to have them.
Mm-hmm. I don't know anybody else that's going to read through all that legislation all over the country and find stuff that the people that wrote it doesn't even know is in there.
Yeah,
it's
a lot.
They read it, they put it in our terms, not their legal terminology.
And they don't have to work. They do pretty much everything so that all we really have to do is send it off. I mean, they make it very simple for us to help. You know, this thing with Louisiana right now, if you live in Louisiana, it's important that you get involved and help USARC. But how do you help if you're not in Louisiana? You become a member. That's how you help. By becoming a member of USARC, you strengthen that base. Our numbers grow, and again, like Lucas was talking about, we don't have 5% of reptile keepers going in with Phil trying to stop bills. So if you don't live in Louisiana, that's how you can help USARC. If you live in Louisiana, become a member. Go to usarc.org and follow all the instructions that USARC has laid out for us so that they can take care of us. But you guys, hey, thank you so much. We are at the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
And I cannot thank you guys enough for spending the 2 hours with us and speaking Retics. Everybody here, you guys are amazing. I'm super, super honored to have had you here. Everybody who stayed through the 2 hours in the chat, thank you so much. Jeremy, thank you for having my back on this. It's just been an amazing, amazing night, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
We got to do this
Thank you,
stuff
everybody.
more, man.
One more thing. There's some of you that are watching that have not hit the like button.
I'll fight you.
You're going to have to start looking up IP addresses.
I'll send Jeremy after you guys, too. He's a big guy. He'll come get you.
No, this was really awesome. I mean,
Just fun.
amazing content. And I just always, I follow everybody on here, and, I just appreciate all the feedback. And always to Lucas and Nathan, just the education on the localities and diving in. Like, one of my favorite videos is when y'all really, really delve into understanding how to know, where your animal comes from and document it and all of that type of stuff. So just everybody just keep doing the best of what you do. And in this, even though it's the 6 people right here, if we just keep doing that, we make the community better day by day.
Appreciate
One last thing, Retic Rant is going to continue next month. We are going to do a Keepers series. The curly-haired keeper, Abby Stone, will be here. I believe that is October 19th. Let me just verify that date.
Awesome.
October 19th, we will have Abby Stone here, the curly-haired keeper. So come back. Check it out. If you have not followed what she's been doing with her Retics over the last year, you are absolutely missing out, and we're going to put it all right here on Retic Rant next month, you guys.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, and you guys are always, I know I have kind of been out of the loop and haven't done a whole lot of stuff with anybody being as busy as I am, but I'm live every Saturday. So if you guys have ever got anything that you want to jump on, shoot your shit, anything that you want to put out, by all means, contact me. It's nothing to send a link out, stuff like that. And if you guys ever need a filler talking head or something like that, I'm always more than happy to do it.
Always.
I always enjoy talking with everybody.
Yes.
Gary, thanks for having us all, man.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Good
Everybody
night.
have an amazing night.
You guys.
Good night, everybody.
Where is my out? There it is.
You like that, Ford?
That was awesome, you guys. Oops.